Five Finger Death Punch is a band. 2005, some dudes decide they want to start a band. These dudes are guitarist Zoltan Bathory and drummer Jeremy Spencer. They were both like, oh, a guitar player and a drummer really aren't enough for most bands. So in 2006, they found the guy with the best beard that could play bass. His name, Matt Snell. But I'm just going to call him Beardo. These guys record some material on their own. A vocalist was also necessary, so they looked in the motorized cheese grater aisle at Kitchen Collection and found a guy named Ivan Moody. They sent him some of their incomplete work, and he decided that it would be fun to yell over that stuff, so he recorded some vocals. They finished up most of their material for their first album, then decided that dueling with guitars would be fun, so Zoltan recruited a child to be the second guitarist. He then decided that dueling a child was kind of inappropriate, so he went searching through various insect hives until he found Daryl Roberts. Daryl only laid down guitar tracks on one song, which happens to be my personal favorite Five Finger Death Punch song. They all finished up recording, got signed, released their first album, The Way of the Fist, then prepared for some grinding it out on tour with some crops. They garnered more and more attention over the next few years, and eventually they felt the need to set Daryl alight. The band was distraught over the situation, so in a pinch they made an exact clone of Jeremy to replace Daryl. They named this clone Jason Hook. Jason because he could be considered the son of Jeremy, whose name begins with J, and Hook because they were absolutely hooked on the idea of making a clone because it's really cool. Or because the letter J is shaped like a hook. I don't know. This did become an issue, though. For lack of a better term, Jason and Jeremy just look like any guy in a rock band. Even wavifying Jason's hair and changing his facial hair was not enough to differentiate them from each other or most other guys in rock bands. It was no wonder old Beardo was the one people were recognizing and getting autographs from. Eventually, they differentiated themselves. Jeremy decided to turn himself into a pointy-haired skelly man. Jason would also pointify his hair, but chose to keep his skin on his body. The band really started to gain some real traction in 2009 after releasing their second album, War is the Answer. This album featured their cover of a song by a band who named the song after themselves, Bad Company. This song was a huge hit for them. It stayed in the top 10 metal songs on iTunes for many, many years to come and will remain their most popular song until album number 4, but I'll get to that later. This track laid the foundation for breaking into the scene with a cover song for many other bands, such as the one with the Wolfpack and the one that succeeded. The band toured in support of War is the Answer for a while, and eventually in 2010 went back to the studio to record a third album. Shortly into this process, Beardo decided it was time for him to leave the band in pursuit of becoming a graphics card 6 years later. This lack of bass was not necessarily the worst thing ever, but the band decided that forever making music akin to Metallica's And Justice for All album wasn't a great idea. They posted an ad on Craigslist titled, "Bassist Needed, Must Have Epic Beard." Hard Rock Casino bartender Chris Cale decided to take a shot at the gig. While he did have a beard, it was not quite epic enough. The band all said, meh, it'll work, but it must become more epic with time. He did the band one better when instead of just growing an epic beard, the dude morphed into frickin' Cthulhu. He's the hero the band didn't even know they needed. This new charisma brought upon them by the Lovecraftian being enabled them to finish their third album, American Capitalist, and release it in late 2011. They were only going up from here. The band embarked upon multiple headlining tours. Coming Down was their first #1 single. In 2012, they even headlined a traveling festival, Trespass America Festival, which just happens to be the first ever rock and metal show I ever went to. The lineup on this fest was great, and I didn't even have the proper appreciation for it at the time. Battlecross, God Forbid, Immure, Pop Evil, Trivium, and Killswitch Engage all supported Five Finger Death Punch on this festival, and it was awesome. And it was awesome for them. They were headlining this festival with support from a few bands that had been around at least 6 years longer than them. That's pretty impressive. Fast forward to May 1st, 2013 at the Revolver Golden Gods Awards. The band announced that they had not one, but 2 new albums coming out in the next 6 months, which turned out to be a lie. The Wrong Side of Heaven and The Righteous Side of Hell Volume 1 released on July 30th, and Volume 2 released on November 19th. which is 18 days over 6 months, Ivan, you liar. Regardless, both of these albums landed at number 2 on the Billboard 200 albums, which was pretty impressive in 2013 for music that primarily features distorted guitars and dudes screaming into the microphone. These albums pretty much laid the foundation for what type of music Five Finger Death Punch would be making from here on out. Some cool stuff was happening for the band with these albums. Wrong Side of Heaven became their most popular song to date with its music video in support of military veterans. They got Rob Halford of Judas Priest on their song Lift Me Up. I totally didn't quote this song in my high school graduation speech at all. No way. Stop lying. Anyway, more touring. Oh no, there's onstage conflict in 2015. Everyone was like, oh no, they're gonna break up. Haha, psych. They're all like, we're not done, and here's a song titled Ain't My Last Dance to prove it. Later in the year, they released their 6th studio album, Got Your Six. Haha, get it? The song Wash It All Away was a massive success and one of their most popular tracks ever to be released. Soon after, things take a nosedive in various ways. In 2016, they got sued by their former record label for working with a new one before their contract was up. I also recall their former label saying they were really just phoning it in with their new music in order to get through their contract more quickly. This ultimately got more or less resolved in the future, so no harm, no foul. Ivan needed to sit out for a few shows on tour, and the band needed to figure out a stand-in. They looked at each other and thought, well, I guess we're all that remains of the band. So let's get that dude Phil from All That Remains. The band would temporarily become colloquially known as Phil Finger Death Punch, but it doesn't have quite the same ring to it as Phil Switch Engage, which was also briefly a thing. The real issues come soon after Ivan's return. When Ivan didn't show up on time for a show, the band brought out a big swollen wolf man, Tommy Vexed, to sing until Ivan showed up, if he even would. Ivan arrived shortly afterward, and the show continued as normal for a while, but it all went into the toilet throughout the show. Members were throwing their instruments around and even storming off stage. Ivan then claimed during the show that this would be his last show with the band. That turned out to be sort of true, as he would later take a hiatus from the band. The band announced a huge tour for 2017, but Ivan then checked himself into rehab. Wolfman filled in during that tour and all other dates until August 2017. Sometime in that time frame, there was some, albeit justified, big tension between Ivan and Wolfman. Ivan stated in an interview that he once was talking to a cab driver who asked him what he did. Ivan's like, oh, yeah, I sing for Five Finger Death Punch. The cab driver is all, oh, that's weird, some other dude said the same thing a few days ago. This was a big Five Finger Death Punch in the gut for Ivan. He later confronted Wolfman and he said, hey, I'm a fist man. You're a wolf man. Don't claim to be a fist man. The beef seems to have been more or less squashed, as since then Five Finger Death Punch has toured with the entire wolf pack. Tommy and Ivan have hugged on stage on multiple occasions, singing together in each other's songs and everything. Five Finger Death Punch would then release their greatest hits album in December of that year. It even included a few new songs that would later be featured on their 2018 7th studio release, And Justice for None. Remember what I said about And Justice for All earlier? They just wouldn't let that sentiment die and absolutely had to make this album in opposition to that lack of bass. Later in 2018, Jeremy was having major back issues, so he had to sit out for a tour. He was replaced with an engine block named Charlie, who would soon after become the new full-time drummer for the band after Jeremy left the band permanently. Jeremy then became a cop in an attempt to throw the band in jail, but his attempts were futile. He also starred in softcore porn. Now we're in present day, and earlier this year, Five Finger Death Punch released their 8th studio album, F8, Fate, F8, I don't know. F8. They were planning to tour in support of this new album, but the entire world's on lockdown right now because of a global pandemic, so we'll see what happens in a few months. What can we expect for the band in the future? Hopefully much more successful touring, cool new music, and Cthulhu shaking his beard. Or maybe they'll all turn into Cthulhu.